Okay, good morning, everyone. And Dave, over to you.
Thank you, Maggie. Yeah, here we are. Welcome to another one of our BSIA broadcasts. This one is on the ECS Card Scheme. That's the Electrotechnical Certification Scheme card scheme for our industry sector. So I wanted to introduce myself, David Wilkinson. For those who don't know me, I'm the Director of Technical Services at the BSIA and have been involved in this on behalf of the BSIA as this scheme has been developed. Today I'm going to be accompanied by David Scott as a co-presenter. David will introduce himself, I'm sure, when we get round to the slides for David as the Managing Director of Skills for Security. We also have a special guest presenter on today as well, which is Jackie Smith, the Group Support Manager at Thompson Group. So we'll be hearing from Jackie shortly as well. I'll also introduce you to Daryl Gilmore. He's the Director of Technical Training at Skills for Security. He'll be controlling our Q&A, so anybody who puts questions in, Daryl will hopefully pick those up accordingly and let us know as we go through the slide deck. And last but not least, we have Maggie Markova, the Marketing and Events Coordinator at the BSIA. Maggie will be looking after the initiating the polls that we have on the actual broadcast today, and hopefully keeping us all in check in regards to the timing. So that's our panel and our helpers for the day. So a couple of quick bits of housekeeping just for you. As I've mentioned, we're going to have some question polls that we'll be initiating throughout the presentation. A little bit of interaction just so you can give us some feedback as we go along. That will help us to understand, not just on the call, but actually afterwards, what the feeling is on certain aspects of the scheme. If you've got any questions, please do use the questions tab. As I said, Darryl will be keeping a close eye on those to see what is coming in and what can be presented at various parts throughout this particular presentation. And finally, just to let you know that the meeting is being recorded. The slides for this and the actual recording will be available on the BSIA's YouTube channel. I can't even say YouTube channel, and also on our website. So look out for those afterwards. So over to the next slide, Dave, if you don't mind. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a quick brief summary of what the scheme is about and where it came from, and then we'll dig into the detail here. So as it says there, this is pretty much, it was developed by a working group. It was done in conjunction with the Fire Emergency and Security Systems Employer Group. That's the group that actually also put together the FES Apprenticeship for our particular industry sector. Now that group actually comprises of trade associations, including the BSIA. It also included the certification bodies, that's NSI, SSRB, and I'll call them for short FES, the FES Employer Representative. So that's actually employers of installers, maintainers, etc. So it was a representative group to make sure that everybody had an understanding and contribution to what the scheme was about. Its primary objective really was the actual drive, qualification and competence. So this again, I guess, is like many sectors, is that everybody's upping their game. There's an aspiration and desire to want to get to level 3 in terms of actually training and competence in the sector. Many companies have already done this and some companies haven't. So this again actually just puts the bar higher than where it was before, but again makes sure that our professional industry sector obviously is attractive to people coming in, and also at a level that reflects the technical expertise needed of those that actually operate in the sector. So we do have a little bit of a fragmented approach to skills, and this was one opportunity where we could actually pull together a scheme that could be used under this particular ECS health and safety card scheme. It's worthy of note, and you'll probably pick up through this, that those of you who've already got cards, and we'll be asking a question on that shortly, actually will be familiar that the old card scheme is very much about just health and safety. That's what it was designed to be, to give access to certain types of sites. Now that's now changed to an occupational structure, so now it does include for the need for that operative to actually demonstrate that they have the necessary skills and training in addition to health and safety. So this is about the operative having relevant training to what they actually do on site in addition to health and safety. So again, that will come clear as we go through today. So I've mentioned about the actual level 3. We obviously wanted to make sure that we also had level 2 operatives as well, because although we might aspire to be level 3, it's very important that we recognise that level 2, those that possibly don't have qualifications but are very experienced and clearly have competence and knowledge in our sector, we needed a mechanism to identify for them. So level 2 was introduced there to allow existing workers to actually undergo an assessment to actually basically demonstrate what they have. So that again was something we needed to build into that. And as the last bullet point says on there, and again probably David will pick up on this later, although it was introduced in July 2020, it was actually fully implemented earlier this year in July 2021. So that's a quick brief synopsis of what the card scheme is about. David, would you mind going to the next slide, please? So I'm going to just pass over to Maggie now to ask the first couple of questions. Now, if you've not done one of these polls before, what should appear for you is that you should appear a question on screen, and it's a little bit like a test. You've got 2 minutes to answer this, but it's very straightforward. All you've got to do is actually select the particular one that you feel is most appropriate, and then just cast your vote. And then what we will do is I'll move on to another slide after that, explain a little bit more about the timelines, and then we'll jump back to what the answers were on this. So if you're able to hopefully to participate in this particular poll, there are 2 questions there. If you can have a quick read of the question and actually then do your yes, no's and etc., that would be very helpful. So I'll let that go on in the background. I'm going to just move on and quickly talk about the actual opposite. It's a little bit small on my screen, so I'm just going to maximize my screen a bit. This is a timeline. It's a good little graphic. It's very busy, but actually if I talk you through this, at the very bottom we'll start with, you've got the sort of more of a bluey colour. This is the existing ECS card scheme. This is what, if you've already operating with these cards, this is what you've more than likely got. You may have a CSCS card, but they are affiliated, so they have recognition, and the ECS is the electrical version of that. So at the moment, you've got the very bottom left, I'll start from. The scheme actually was notified to industry back in July 2020, and then that was given a 1-year notice. So actually on the so obviously from the 1st of July this year, the actual scheme would then come fully into play. So as of January this year, the end of new applications ceased, and that means then you'd have to start applying for the new ECS FES scheme, which is its equivalent sort of badge above. From the 1st of July this year, as I've stated, the actual end of renewals of applications actually took place. So if at that point you've not renewed your ECS card, you would have to go through the new ECS FES scheme, which is the sort of the more grey bit at the very top. If you were fortunate to have actually renewed your cards before the 1st of July, then you'll see at the very bottom row there to the right, you can actually still use that existing card up until the 30th of June 2024. So that gives you your 3 years of your card, at which point then you won't be able to do anything with that card. You'll have to move across to the new ones. But that's giving industry what we would see as reasonable time of notification and actually ability to use the old card schemes whilst the transition to the new place. So just jump into the top of that now. If you look at the top left sort of badge there, the ECS FES scheme launched. So again, you can see it's mirroring the actual bottom there. So at the time that we notified industry that the scheme was starting to be wound down, the new scheme also got wound up at that point. So the 1st of July, it was notified to people. People could apply for initial new applications on the 1st of January this year. And then moving slightly further to the right there, obviously it was then compulsory for renewal. So again, on the 1st of July, if you needed to renew a card, you would have to renew using the new scheme. And then, as you can see from the next one from there, there's a little bit of an anomaly here, because what we are looking at is that if you applied for the, let's say, a level 2 operative, so you're going through an assessment maybe to get this, then actually that renewal would expire from July 2025. So that's a a 4-year sort of time frame, but then there's going to be a discussion to be held around about July 2025 if this is still going to happen. Let's see what happens in the future. But they're looking at the view of, do we want to continue with level 2 operatives? This is, as I said before in the opening slide, the aspiration here is that everybody's got level 3. Now, if obviously those at level 2 are not wanting to transition to level 3 for various reasons, we need to look from an industry perspective what that looks like, and do we want to continue with a level 2 operative, or do we make everybody move across to level 3? But that's further down the line. So that's a discussion that we as a trade body and others will no doubt have and input into the process at that time. So that's a bit of a graphic which explains all of that, and the bits in the middle really are just sort of showing you how that goes on. But I think the two key lots to look at there is the bottom part is the old scheme, the top part is the new scheme. So that's probably as much as I want to go through that. But as you said, if you study that further, clearly if you've got questions on that, please do put them in the chat, but hopefully that will start to make some sense. So over to Maggie. Maggie, have we got some results from the first couple of questions on the poll?
Hello, yes, I will end the poll now. Hopefully that's given everyone enough time to answer, and I will now share the results on the screen, so hopefully everyone will be able to see them. As you can see, are you aware of the recent changes to acquiring an ECS card? We've had 63% say yes, 11% say no, and 26% said heard bits in here and there. So it's a really good thing we're doing this to the audience. We're doing it now, clearly, because there is still a lot to learn. What cards are you currently using as well? On the next question, we've got a little bit of everything. As you can see, people have mostly been saying systems technician, gold card, and apprentice. Hopefully that helps. I can keep the results on for another minute or so if anyone else would like anything to say about them. David?
No, that's helpful to know. As you said, it gives us a bit of a steer and a guide. As you said, there's probably lots more questions we'd like to have asked, but I think keeping it quite simple, that's a good sort of point for us to sort of understand where we're at. So no, thank you for that, Maggie, and thank you for those that have managed to contribute to that particular slide on there. So Daryl, I'm going to very quickly just hand over to yourself. Have you had any questions in the actual Q&A that we need to consider at this moment in time?
Yep, so there's maybe one or two that's come through, another one just as I was speaking there as well. So is this going to be a compulsory card scheme then that's enforced by building sites going forward? And does the level 2 or level 3 require any additional training to obtain the card, or is there anything available?
Okay, well, I've got a feeling David's going to cover a lot of this in his slides. So, so rather than try and answer it now, I think some of the things regarding the how do you do this, the training and the cost, David is going to cover that. So I won't go into that detail, but in terms of compulsory, is that if it's a little bit like the existing scheme, and I'm happy for David to chip in when he comes in at this point anyway. But yeah, I mean, it's no different to the old scheme in terms of if you're required to have a card to go onto site, then it would be a requirement just for them particular sites. I've always made the case from the very start when we talked about need for ECS cards, is that if you don't work on sites that require them, there's no mandatory need for you to have them. So it really comes down to what your work portfolio is about. But do consider that if this is a means that the individual or the company can get a recognition for themselves or for their employees to say, look, my people are actually, they have a white card, blue stripe, or they have a gold card, or whatever they've got. It is a recognition. It's a means to say that you can demonstrate that that person has got some qualification and competence that you would otherwise maybe not have been able to prove, even though that person might have relevant experience. So it's a mechanism to be used, but it's not absolute compulsory that for every site. You won't go to a residential site and need to pull this card out unless you feel that would be of benefit to your company. So it's probably as much as I can answer on that one.
The one point to add there, Dave, is that what we are finding is that the type of card that you apply for is becoming scrutinised, and you need to make sure that the people that work for your organisation have the correct card. And I'm certainly going to cover that in the part that I'm going to go over just now, really. So,
okay. I guess without further ado then, David, shall I hand over to you and you can start to give all the juicy detail on that? So thank you, and the floor is yours.
No problem. So thanks very much, Dave. Really insightful. My name's David Scott. I'm the Managing Director at Skills for Security. And one of the reasons I'm mainly here is because we are the training arm of the BSIA, and we already are a preferred training provider for the ECS. And we roll out these cards across the nation, really. So as Dave alluded to, and probably not as much as he should have, the BSIA were absolutely instrumental in leading these changes throughout the ECS card structure, with an overarching objective of making it easier to identify grading of those working throughout the fire and security sector. Granted, the communication's been a bit slow from ECS, and we're now trying to rectify that through these types of broadcasts and also the communication that we're sending out. But the delay in the communication that went out was mainly due to some last minute changes from the ECS, where they're wanting to break down the competency levels even further. And we're calling it the crosshatch scheme, but I'm going to cover that a little later on. But we're now trying to rectify that, get the communication out there to the sector so that people are now fully aware of what is required from them. So in the past, when you were applying for a card, you were applying for either fire detection and alarm systems or the emergency and security systems card. Now, the card structure follows that of, the new card structure follows that of the electrical industry, where you can now apply to be a labourer, an apprentice, which leads to the gold card, the systems operative, systems technician, and technical manager. And each card has the option to apply across various disciplines within the sector. So you now no longer apply for the multidiscipline, you apply for the card that you're competent in. So that would be fire, alarm installation and maintenance. It would be fire emergency lighting, security, or fire and security if you're competent in all. So the card structure has changed to better reflect the type of role in each discipline and relevant level of competency throughout the sector. So just a quick overview, quick overview of the main changes. So these FES ECS occupations replace the existing cards, and the requirements become compulsory for all new initial card applications from the 1st of July 2021. And from July 2021, all existing ECS fire and security card renewals, where applicable, will need to meet the new card qualifications requirements. And obviously Dave had quite rightly highlighted that earlier. So the first card we're going to look at is the labourer card. And the labourer card is for those that are in supportive roles within the sector. So these people would assist other FES qualified engineers and staff with the installation of things like cabling and other unskilled worker supervision. And the two routes for application of this card are relatively straightforward. Route one is, do you have a GIB approved theory technical qualification? And the different types of qualifications in there are like the FIA fire alarm qualifications, or the EAL fire alarm qualifications, or even SVQ and NVQs in city and guilds and stuff like that. So if you have one of those qualifications, this will be accepted for your card. So for example, a pre-employment city and guilds level 2 fire and security call would be applicable. You would then need to pass your ECS health and safety multiple choice assessment, which is the 50 questions to be completed in 30 minutes, and you need to achieve 43 to pass. So the ECS health and safety test for all the cards has now got a little bit more difficult. You need an 86% pass mark to achieve that card. Previously it was 80%. Route 2, if you don't hold a GIB approved theory qualification, would mean that you would need to complete a health and safety course. And there's several on the ECS website, but an example of some of these are like IOSH working safely and IOSH managing safely. If you have those qualifications, all you need to then do, if you have achieved that within the last 3 years, is have proof of employment within the sector. If your qualification's over 3 years, you need to also do the ECS multiple choice assessment. Now, why this card's really important to know about is because we have been told from some of our partners and employers that their engineers had a labourer card prior to July 2021. They've turned up to building sites with that card, and because they're lone worker, they've actually been refused entry. And that's becoming more and more common. The construction sites and building sites that these engineers are going to are now requesting that the engineers have the card that is appropriately assigned to them, which at a minimum would be the systems operative if they're lone working. So the next card we're going to look at is the systems operative, and this card is for those that work in the sector independently. So they're not classed as labourers, and they're doing technical work for your organisation. So specifically for those with no formal qualifications like an apprenticeship or a previous NVQ or SVQ, but they do have a requirement to have an ECS card. So to be eligible for that card, applicants must complete the following. So the first big change is that they need to complete the newly developed ECS FES multiple choice assessment, and it's quite challenging. I've actually completed it myself, and luckily I passed, but it is a challenging test for those that have been on the tools for years and years and years, but haven't done anything formal to sort of solidify that knowledge that they have. So just like the other cards that I referred to earlier, when applying for a systems operative card, you need to apply for either fire, security, fire emergency lighting, or the fire and security if you're multidiscipline. And if you are doing multiple discipline, you need to do 2 multiple choice tests. So a little bit more specific information on the assessments there is that the FES assessment is a 30 question assessment, and you get 30 minutes to complete the test. And it's an 80% pass mark, so you must get 24 and above to pass. And what's good about this level 2 systems operative multiple choice test is it follows the same standard that the level 3 apprenticeship does and the newly developed experienced worker course. And what's great about that is it maintains the standard of the people that are doing these types of tests and ensures standardization throughout the whole sector, which I do believe is very, very important. On top of that technical test they now need to do to get that card, they still need to do the health and safety test as well. And as previously mentioned, it's an 86% pass rate, 43 out of 50 to pass. So what we are doing, BSIA and Skills for Security, to support the sector on these changes is that we have now released a brand new 1-day course to help support your engineers through that systems operative course. We've been made aware that a number of the engineers out there that are going through the systems operative aren't quite ready for the assessment and therefore failing. And what that's saying to us is that there's loads of gaps out there in the engineers' minds when they're completing these tests. And what this 1-day course is all about is to get them ready and prepare them for that test, so that the pass rates are higher and so that these people's knowledge is more clear and ready to basically complete. The assessment and the course is fully remotely delivered. So we delivered this just a couple of weeks ago. Daryl, our technical director, delivered the course, and he delivered it over a sort of online webinar, and it was a 1-day course. And then straight after that, the engineers get the option to continue some studying and then complete the test, or the test can be done at a later date. But the test from ECS is also done remotely through ECS's remote invigilation software. And it's really quite good. We've had some technical glitches, but generally the quality of the product is very good. And overall, I've been quite satisfied with it. So the reapplication of this card is the exact same as it was before. Every 3 years, you need to reapply for the card. The cost of the short course that the Skills for Security deliver, and what I should say is we're currently the only people in the UK that are delivering this. I do anticipate now that we've done it, other people might follow, and I'm not against that. I think it's a great idea. And we estimate that it's about £100 per person for that 1-day course. And if you are a BSIA member, you'll receive an additional 20% off that price. What other costs you have there is you still need to pay for the assessments, which we estimate at about £50 for each assessment. Bear in mind, you've got 2 to do now. and then the cost of the card, which is £50 as well. So all in all, you're looking about £250 all in for the cost of that course, the 2 assessments and the card. The next card I want to look at is the systems technician. Now, there's 2 ways to become a systems technician now. First of all, you can become an apprentice and work your way up to become a systems technician. And there's also a newly developed experienced worker program that NET have developed, and we're going to look at that in the next slide. But one question I had for everyone on the call and also the panel, is this the first time that the fire and security sector has been accepted as at the same level as the electrical industry? Because yes, we've been able to apply in the past for gold cards, but there was no set structure, set standards, set criteria in order to get that gold card. However, now for the first time in my eyes, the ECS have set this benchmark of, in order to get a gold card, you must be a competent person, and there's only 2 ways to do that: apprenticeship or experienced worker. And I think for me, it's a fantastic drive to show competency within the sector. And I wish it could be compulsory, like someone highlighted in the questions earlier on, but obviously I think it is a massive step forward that's been led by the BSIA here. So typically a systems technician works unsupervised in all areas of the installation, maintenance and commission of fire and security disciplines, but most importantly, they're fully competent people. There are only 2 viable ways to work towards the ECS Gold Card scheme, and in this slide, we're going to focus on the apprenticeship. So the apprenticeship is for new entrants to the industry, and apprentices are recognised through the FES apprentice card when training to the level 3 FES apprenticeship standard, which industry has accredited and approved as a competency-based programme. And the goal at this level is to make sure that apprentices can work towards that level 3 apprenticeship standard safely. So there's 2 criteria to apply for an apprenticeship card. And for those that haven't seen the apprenticeship card, it's the white card with the red stripe along it. So you first of all need to enrol on an active FES apprenticeship programme with a training provider. You then need to complete your multiple choice ECS health and safety assessment. And it's the same assessment that your engineers would complete as systems operatives, labourers, or whatever it might be. So it's the 43 out of 50, 86% pass mark. Once you've passed that test, your training provider automatically applies for that card, makes sure you're eligible, and then offsets the cost to get back to the employer normally. So to get your apprentice a card, it's normally about £50 for the assessment at least. So the apprentice then continues on their learner journey, and which includes things like competency-based working on site and proving competency through practical activities in the workshop. And once the training provider and employer deem that you're ready, they'll put you forward for your final assessment. And what we call that is an endpoint assessment, which is assessed externally by external assessors and accreditation body, which again is another level of security, proving competency there. One big change is that all gold card holders and systems operative holders, as far as I'm led to believe, need to keep their CPD up to date over the renewal period. And the renewal period for the cards is 3 years. So they need to continuously professionally develop and prove that they're doing that when they reapply. And the card is now mandatory for all apprentices. So an apprentice cannot complete the apprenticeship without achieving that card. And as mentioned, the card is for new entrants, but they now get the option to pick what pathway they're doing. So they aren't going to pick an ECS card for fire and security if they're only doing fire or they're only doing security. They get to specify which area of expertise they're focusing on. The last card I'm going to look at is again the gold card, but now the experienced worker pathway. So as I mentioned, there's 2 ways to get this card. You can be an apprentice and work your way up, or you can enrol on the newly developed experienced worker program. And that's operated by a company called NET, which are owned by the ECS, or they're a subsidiary of the ECS. I'm not entirely sure of the full relationship there, but the only body to offer this just now is NET. So the FES Experienced Worker Assessment is for people who have been working in the industry for a minimum of 5 years, and that's really important. And they obviously need to be qualified for whatever reason, whether it's they want it for themselves or their business wants them to have it, or it's for the site that they're working on. They need to be qualified to that level 3 benchmark. Now, what I would say is, from experience, again, if you are sending people to a building site and you're telling that building site that you have fully competent engineers coming up, and you're charging a day rate for that person to be on that site, and they turn up with a systems operative card, I do wonder how long it's going to be until construction sites turn around and say, that's not a competent person, that's not a gold card. And that's just food for thought further down the line for people to take on board. But the Experienced Worker Programme is the same content as the FES Apprenticeship. So both new entrants and existing workers are now being assessed and accredited to the same standard. And there's 3 steps to achieve an Experienced Worker Assessment. And the first of that is it needs to be achieved within the first 12 months, can't extend longer. And that's really important to understand as well. So the first is you need to carry out a range of specified tasks in the workplace. You need to upload that evidence to an online assessment portal. And the tasks need to cover a number of areas like health and safety, installation, commissioning, inspection, and servicing. And the evidence would be recorded and assessed by a NET assessor, so someone that's competent within the industry to mark that. Your experienced workers would then need to complete a stage 2, which is a practical assessment on safe isolation on a single phase circuit. So they'll need to go to a NET approved site, carry out a safe isolation activity under controlled circumstances, and then complete the 3rd stage, which is the online knowledge assessment. And this is a different assessment from the level 2. It's a level 3 multiple choice assessment. It takes 90 minutes to complete. It's got 60 questions and it's an 80% pass mark. And again, it's quite challenging for those that haven't had any sort of formal education. And I have no doubt that the engineers out there are very competent in doing their tasks, but unless they've had some formal of education, they are going to struggle to pass those 2 systems operative and experienced worker tests without some support. So the Experienced Worker Programme is a little bit more expensive and would involve significant investment for organisations to put their engineers through this. There isn't any funding, as far as I'm aware, available for this, but it breaks down into 3 costs. You've got your digital assessment, which is about £660. You've got your safe isolation, which is that practical test, which is £165. And then you've got your online knowledge test, which is again £165. So one of the most recent changes that's still been in development, and maybe Dave can go over this in a little bit more detail in a second, is this cross-hatch scheme, which I referred to a little bit earlier. So if you think of the bigger picture just now, we've got labourer cards, system operative, we've got gold cards, which is a system technician, you've got technical manager. And then when they're applying for those cards, they can apply for fire, security, fire emergency lighting, and fire and security. And one of the last minute changes that's came into fruition is that not only can they apply for the discipline, but they can apply for the task that they're specifically competent in as well. And what I mean by that is, if you've got someone that is a fire installer or a security maintainer, they would then apply to have an ECS Gold card in security maintenance or fire installer. Now, this hasn't all been ironed out, how that's going to work and the costs associated with that, but there are discussions ongoing. Now, at first, when I heard of those changes, I was a bit taken aback and I didn't see the need in it. However, when you look at our sector, it's very varied. You've got all those different disciplines, and when you speak to an engineer, they're a service engineer, they're a projects engineer, they're an installer, there's not many people out there at this moment in time that's fully competent in everything, except from those that have completed something like an apprenticeship. And the apprenticeship was only developed in 2017, and it's a 3-year programme. So we're only getting competent engineers coming out the back end of that now. So what we should see in 5-10 years' time is thousands of people that are multi-skilled, multidisciplined. However, just now, for these current changes that the ECS have made, I can understand why they've split it in such a way. Dave, have you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, well, as it happens, I mean, we get a couple of slides on from now, we're actually doing a bit of a final poll, and this is what I'm going to explain a little bit about what has happened on the latter stages of actually implementing the card. So rather than go into it now, I will reserve that till we go into the questions. And when I explain the questions, then hopefully people see on screen the options that we are seeking further information. And as I said at the very start of this, this is it's a bit of a democracy here in terms of we've got obviously a group running on this. We're part of that group, as is other trade bodies and, as I said before, certification bodies and others. So we're all having a say in what this looks like and how it works. And one thing I would say that I'm trying to look at is I'm just looking at the practicalities of this, is how does it work and how does our industry work. What I'm very conscious of in the past, we've been sort of put into square pegs in round holes. If the electrical industry wants to do it this way, we shouldn't have to be forced to follow that. We should do what we wish and see as the right thing to do for our industry sector. So there's been a lot of flexibility given on this, and this is why we're looking for some further feedback to make sure that we get an industry view that we can put in and say, well, we know that's the view of industry because they've told us that. So I'll go into that in more detail once we get to that particular part. But as you said, that's probably all I'd like to say at this moment in time.
No problem, thanks, Dave. I'm going to hand you over to Darryl for the 1 or 2 questions that I can see in the chat box.
Brilliant. So first one I'm going to bring across, that there has been a good bit of interest, which has been great to see, and I do encourage everybody else to try and get involved. So one from John Davies: will the new FIA courses and associated qualifications that will be developed by FireQual and BAFE, will these be taken into account for the working towards the ECS card for both level 2 and 3?
Yeah, so if Dave's got anything to add to that, it's fine. But yeah, in fact, I'm led to believe that the FIA, the FireQual, and the EAL courses that's being developed will be recognised towards the ECS scheme. So, for example, especially around the labourer card and the systems operative, they won't need to do the technical assessment for the systems operative course if they've completed the FIA, the FireQual, or the EAL qualifications. It exempts them from that, and I've just realised I missed that on my slide. But yeah, thanks for asking the question. Yeah.
Is that pathway specific, David?
It is. So, as I think most people will be aware, there is only qualifications being developed for fire just now. So EAL, FireQual, and FIA are all fire qualifications. So you're absolutely correct. That would only exempt you from the fire elements of the pathway programme.
So if anybody was wanting a multi-pathway card rather than just a fire technician card, how would they go around about it?
So if
they had those associated qualifications.
That's okay. So if they've already got the fire element of it, it exempts them from that assessment, and they would only need to do the security assessment.
So hopefully that clears up some comments. Try to see if there was any other ones. A lot with regards to training and the short courses, and there's another one again from John, just as an employer, what are the costs involved in running through these engineers? And I know that we've just covered that, but could you summarise anything to do with regards to costing and downtime required for training engineers so that they can obtain a level 3 card?
Yeah, no problem, John. So if you're looking at this level 2, first of all, it's not mandatory to put them on our 1-day short course. You can put them directly onto the systems operative FES assessment the health and safety assessment, and then apply for the card. So the cost for that is £50 roughly per assessment and £50 for the card. Now, I know it's not quite like that, but just simple figures. So you're looking at around £150 to do the 2 assessments and the 1 card. Now, what we've done is, because we've been aware of so many people failing those tests, is that we've created that 1-day course to almost get your engineers ready. So for a small amount of investment, which is the £100, and again, if you're a BSIA member, which I think you are, John, you receive 20% discount on that. And what that then allows you to say is that you've not only invested in the staff and helped them get ready for the assessment, but they're probably more likely to pass, and therefore you wouldn't need to pay for the 2, 3, 4 reset assessments that you might have to do. But yeah, and for the level 3, you either have engineers on the apprenticeship, and they naturally go through that process, and that's fully funded by the government, really. There might be a 5% contribution fee needed, depending on the age and size of business and stuff like that. And the only cost there would be the health and safety assessment and the application for the card. If you're going through the experienced worker program, because a lot of your guys have got 20 years plus experience, you're looking at almost £1,000 to get them through that experienced worker program. So it's not cheap, and it's whether you need that card for your sites. That's the question.
We're just conscious of time, and this one might need a little bit more research just to fully answer this question. But one of the attendees has recently put a colleague through the IOSH for directors for renewal of the ECS health and safety card, but this was not accepted under ECS's framework. So would they have to complete IOSH managing safely or anything like that? And this is a bit of a harder question. This may require us to get back and in contact with this candidate, but do you have any idea of?
I'll exactly what you said, Daryl. I'm not sure, but I know how it works. And what they do is they look at qualification A and qualification B, and the criteria needs to map directly. If there's any sort of shortfall there, then they can't do it. You need to have the right qualification. The one thing I would ask, and I'm happy to put you in contact with some of the contacts I've got at ECS, they are quite helpful. They're sometimes hard to get a hold of if you phone them, but if you've got the right contact via email, I'm more than happy to pass that on. The other thing I would ask is what card were they applying for? Because if they've got an IOSH for directors, I wouldn't suspect they're going for labourers or systems operative. I would imagine they're going for that higher level technical manager. So again, I've not covered that in this presentation, but I would have thought that the IOSH for directors would be sufficient, but obviously if you've applied, then not. But yeah, I'm happy. My email is on the last slide. Please reach out to me, anybody. Ask any questions, and I'm happy to put you in touch with the right people.
Perfect. Thanks, Fiona. Thank you. And that's all from me just now.
David, I've just come in on that one as well. My experience of working in this group as well is that as they develop what constitutes exemptions, there does seem to be some flexibility there, because they only know what they know. If somebody says here's another qualification and it hasn't been considered, they will consider it. And as you rightly said, if it doesn't meet the mark, they'll say it falls short, or it gives you a part exemption. But if actually it's above and beyond what they've already got, then they would no doubt, I presume, accept it into the portfolio of exempting standards and qualifications. So I think you're right. I was just looking quickly on their website, because it does have NEBOSH diplomas, safety for. In fact, it's got IOSH safety for directors as a qualification requirement. Is that not what the question was?
Yeah, it was.
I'm looking at it on their website, so I don't understand why it's not eligibility.
So we'll just
If you get in touch with either David, myself, or Dave from the BSIA, we'll try and put some more context round about that for you, Rianne. Thanks.
Guys, just as a footnote to that, looking at the same information on the ECS website, it does say a craft card application needs to be made for that card. I don't know if that's relevant to this application or not, what this gentleman's speaking about, but as you say, it does definitely mention that the IOSH safety for directors is acceptable, but there is that footnote at the bottom in red to say a craft card application also needs to be made for that card. So I'm not sure whether that's helpful or not, but I'm sure it's something that can be looked into later on.
So what that means, just to the craft card, means that they must have already had the systems gold card, the systems technician gold card. Yeah. That's a mandatory part of the technical manager, that you must not only have the IOSH health and safety, but you've got the gold card already. So that is probably what's happened here. Right, we'll move on because we're running low on time. Next up is our guest, Jackie, who you just heard. Jackie, could you just briefly introduce yourself and let the group know who you are and who you work for?
Indeed. Good morning to you all. My name is Jackie Smith. I'm the Group Support Manager for Thomson Group based in Wolverhampton, and I'm delighted to join today's panel and excited to be part of something which I think is massively important in recognising our industry, which is sometimes a little bit forgotten. So good morning to you all.
Thanks, Jackie. I would like you to kick us off really about talking through your experience of using the apprenticeship card and how Thomson Group have engaged with that, and how easy you found it and what processes you've used, and just enlighten everybody about how you use that card really.
Okay, so historically in the past, a lot of our guys have used the CSCS card, but we know in recent years there have been various changes and murmurings about ECS becoming the preferred card, and there's always been that sort of a little bit of a grey area. But very recently, I think in the last year or 18 months or so, it's becoming more and more apparent that, should I say this, ECS is possibly the preferred way to go, and it certainly seems to be a lot more accepted in various areas and various sites. Very recently, actually in March of this year, I had a colleague who went through an ECS application process and was awarded a card, it was a great card. It was a fire system installer card with additional security system installer, which was fantastic for what we do. And he attained that accreditation in March of this year. And a little later on, I've got two guys who needed to look at attaining a new card in just August time, just very recently. And in my naivety, I was thinking, well, brilliant, we'll go back and get the same card we got in March. Obviously, that's no longer available. And this is when we started to get involved with the new FES card. So working in conjunction with Skills for Security, we've recently put through two of our colleagues through this process, and I have to say I'm delighted with the results. But just jumping back before that, having spoken to ECS about how we attained the FES the ECS FES card, that was a little bit more concerning for me, in as much as that there was a general rollout, I believe, expected earlier in the year, which hadn't happened for various reasons. The big thing for me was that the only provision to attain that card was by travelling down to Swanley in Kent, which somebody asked earlier on about downtime for engineers. So that in itself, depending on where you're situated in the country, you know, it is massive. It's a definite day out of the business for you guys. And then there's always that concern as well, that because there'd been no pre-preparation, as it were, that there was a potential of travelling however many miles away for us, a 3.5-hour train journey, 7-hour train journey in total, and not actually attaining the card. So that was a bit of a concern. So to actually work with Skills for Security and be able to do what we've just done has been a godsend, in all honesty. Being able to do the preparation online without the guys leaving the office, and then attaining the card 3 days later, taking the test, both the ECS Health and Safety Assessment and also the FES assessment, has been absolutely brilliant. That's my experience thus far, and I would hope to pursue that experience as we move forward and see more of our colleagues need to attain this card.
Brilliant. And Jackie, this isn't, I've not prepped you for this question or anything, but I thought it's probably quite important to ask. Where does Thomson Group sit in terms of wanting to obtain the gold card? Is that an aspiration for the group, that you want your engineers to be qualified?
Of course it is. It's something that we are passionate about in promoting the best, as all of us I'm sure are, promoting the best for our people and for our teams. And as you mentioned earlier, to have a card that actually acknowledges that an individual has attained that standard, has that experience, has the learning and the certification to say, yes, Joe Bloggs is a gold standard engineer. He or she has got the experience, got the relevant knowledge, and has got that card. It gives such a lift, I think, to guys as well. It actually, to see that added to their portfolio, it's interesting, you know, we speak about our industry and how, for me, I definitely feel our industry is sometimes forgotten. It gets enmeshed in the electrical side of things, and we sometimes pushed aside. So to see something that actively recognises, and I know from experience, I work with 60 or 70 engineers, they love a gold card. They absolutely love a gold card. So to push that forward and actually have it, you know, in their portfolio and to be able to show on site, it's a recognition of us as a business in supporting our aspirations for our engineers, and certainly a recognition for their skill set and their hard work. So hugely important to us, massively so.
And you guys are obviously big supporters of the apprenticeship programme, and naturally all of those apprentices are now working towards that gold card through the development over the next 3 years, which is excellent as well.
Huge, because I think, again, as an industry and we only have to listen to recent reports in press, we're all well aware of it. My biggest challenge this year, or our biggest challenge as a business, has certainly been resource. So I hate to use the term, but it's a term I use daily. We like to think we can grow our own engineers of the future, and supporting them through this programme, working with other partners within the industry, Skills for Security, whoever, you know, we're happy to work, and we want people to work with us to promote the industry and to bring our engineers of the future to us, because frankly, I can't see another route that they're coming from at this point. So the apprenticeship framework for me is massively important. I could never underestimate it, and I think it will only become more so as time moves on. Thanks very much, Jackie. That's lovely. Going to move on to the next slide, which is our final poll, and I'm going to hand you back to Dave. Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you everybody for your input so far. Thank you, Jackie, as well. Very aspiring. Thank you. The last bit really for us now, just to finish off on, is that we've got a final sort of a couple of questions which I'd like to sort of pose, and it goes a little bit back to what David and myself talked about earlier about the final sort of considered changes to make these cards completely practical for our industry sector. So Maggie, are you able to put on screen the actual poll? Maybe start that one off. So this is our final one. I'm going to talk you through this quickly, but please do answer it as you go along, and as soon as we've sort of done the 2 minutes, we'll just look at what the answers are, and I think this will be quite an interesting takeout for us as well. So I think on the first question, thinking about the security pathway, now this is as in security pathways covering intruder and hold-up alarms, access control, and VSS CCTV. So thinking about that as an existing worker assessment, which David's talked about, which card do you think best reflects the industry practice? So if you think a separate card for intruder, access, VSS is required, please select that particular radio tab. If you think one card covering everything is appropriate, select that one. It's a very basic question, but it gives us an understanding of how you operate, because different companies, some companies might have multidisciplined engineers, others might not. So I think, you know, we're trying to work out the practicalities of going for this. And as David has mentioned before, you know, obviously any assessments you take add costs, but of course not everybody's going to have an engineer that can do all these disciplines, in which case now that could make it extremely difficult to pass an assessment if your engineer doesn't do VSS, for instance, but obviously he's very competent on intruder and hold-up alarm. So that's the first question. So I'm trying to find out, you know, whether you think separate cards are better, so you've got more flexibility and choice, or you think one card for absolutely everything in the security pathway. So that's the first question. The second one, thinking about the actual job functions that the engineering staff actually carry out. So if you think in terms of, you know, you've got some surveyors or designers, that's what they do as a job role. They don't necessarily install anything. They don't maintain anything. You've got engineers that do that. So thinking about the type of function that they carry out, do you think that we should have separate cards for survey, design, install and maintenance? Or do you think we should just have one card? So, you know, good old fashioned, you need a card, doesn't matter what you do, but you're going to need to take assessments. And it goes back into that first question. You know, if you're looking for somebody to be competent on installing and maintaining systems or commissioning systems, but all they do is design and survey, so they don't necessarily go to sites and install. You know, that could be quite, you know, that means they're going to have to go through an assessment for something they don't do as a job role. So again, the question is about, is it separate cards for survey and design, possibly a separate card for install, maybe a combined one install maintenance. So there's not that many options here, and it's a bit deeper than this, but it's just getting a general feel. Do you think one card can cover it all, or do you think we need separate cards? So there's two separate questions there. One is the pathway, and one is the job function. So if you've had a chance to think about that and mull it over, appreciate if you could put your answers to that one. We'll give it another minute, and then we'll see what the feedback is on that one.
Will we move to some questions from Daryl before we finish off?
To sort of finish off, because that's our last sort of slide anyway. So yeah, if Daryl's got anything that he wants to feed back on whilst we look at the poll details later.
Yep, just going through some things. So there's been quite a lot that's come through, mainly to do with exemptions of existing qualifications for exemption of different aspects of both health and safety and security side. So mainly coming down to the SPA health and safety passport, core health and safety passport. I have, for anybody that has access to the question and answer, the Q&A section, I have put in there a link to the ECS cards exemptions for all health and safety. Where are we? Everything else it's just been very, very positive feedback.
The one thing I'd say, Daryl, is the health and safety exemptions haven't changed. The only thing that's changed is the technical exemptions, which we obviously covered.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay.
Will we move over to the poll results?
Yep.
Okay, so you can see on screen now the poll results. As we can see on the first question, thinking about the security pathway, existing worker assessment, which card best reflects security industry practice? And we've had, I want to say, about 75% of people have voted for one card for intruder alarm, which is obviously quite interesting. And second question, think about job functions, which card types should be available? And it's not so much 50-50, but there's a little bit more diversity there. 67% have said separate cards.
Sorry to interrupt, Maggie. Is there any way of, is there anything we can click at? I think if
I can share the results now with you, Simon.
You can see the
so you can see them on screen now.
That's better.
Lovely.
Oh, great stuff.
If anybody wants to put any last minute questions in, just while we finish up here, if anybody's got any final things they want clarification on, if you could quickly put that into either the chat box or the Q&A section, that would be great, and try and get answered before we finish our webinar.
It is quite interesting to see that 70% of people support the separate cards for tasks or job functions, as it's been put in the questions.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The industry is quite varied, so that it is needed, I guess. So
yeah, we're not just a one-trick pony, so to say, and that's quite a clear reflection of how people view each other's job roles within the sector, and it's an interesting topic of conversation.
Over to you, Dave.
Yeah, okay. Well, no, that's it. That is an interesting poll on that one. I guess I probably thought that separate cards for pathways might be a more preferred, but I think again it goes back to that question. It depends on your engineering resource. If you do have engineers that do separate disciplines, then of course it sort of changes it. But no, that's an interesting one, and it's quite, as you said, this is why we wanted to do this particular poll. So yeah, I think from me, just to sort of sum up, and it's been a really interesting sort of deep dive into the card scheme. I think, as we said at the very start, there's a mix of people's knowledge on this, and my understanding of speaking to our own members recently on this is that I didn't think the understanding was there of their knowledge, and I think again that's just probably down to maybe the impacts of COVID, the fact that people are working in a different way. There's not so much sort of I think everyone's on overload of information that gets sent to them. So although I know we update members on what's going on with this scheme and other issues and things that develop over time, and I'm pleased we've done this particular broadcast, because I think it was needed to understand the ins and outs. And I think the key thing I've taken from this myself is that actually now to see what them routes are and how they're funded. I think that's the important thing, because it's still be quite it's not been easy to find where the costs are in this. And of course, as I've noted in some of the chat here as well, that you know, some companies are in a position where they want to do their own training, and obviously there are parts where you can do, and there are parts where you've got to have the official assessments and to get the qualification. So I think it's been a real eye-opener. I think it's again another good example of industry trying to work together to make sure that we try and achieve something practical rather than just being told this is what you've got to do. I think there's some other good things in the background here that will help and support schemes like this here, which we're dealing with in other sort of sectors as well. So I think from my perspective, I don't really have anything more to add to this, but I think it's great that we've managed to finish it dead on time. So it does leave me just to say that I just want to thank all the panelists, our presenters, for obviously their time this morning. Thank you ever so much for all the for the delegates that come on board and listen to this, and again, fantastic to see the amount of questions that we've had. I think it's been a really interactive session. So if anybody's got any sort of final sort of feedback they want to give to this particular broadcast, we've done this with polls and the Q&A. I hope you found it useful and informative, and it just leaves me to say please do enjoy the rest of your day, and hopefully look forward to a safe and good weekend for everybody. So that's all from me. Is there anything, Maggie, from yourself before we just close the call?
No, I'm good. Just like I said, like we said earlier, if you are interested in viewing this broadcast again, it will be on our YouTube channel and on our BSIA website.
Fantastic. In that case, everybody, thank you ever so much for your time, and hopefully we'll see you on a future broadcast or on another meeting somewhere. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for having us.
All. Take care. Can we just leave the chat box open just for emails, etc., to be taken off just before we close? Excellent. If anybody is looking for additional information, I have put inside the chat box contact information for all involved. Thanks.
Thank you, Darryl.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
So, bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thanks, Jackie.
Thank you.
Darryl, we've got the induction.
I know. I just wanted to give a couple of minutes just for people to copy and paste.